got so drunk that by 11 o'clock my last set, I couldn't see. Hello and welcome to another episode of Hearing in Colour with Matt Simon. This podcast discusses creativity and synesthesia. Synesthesia is a cross-wiring of the senses, which means that sometimes you hear music and see colours, or hear words and taste things. Today I'm going to be discussing what it's like to be on stage and what it's like to be a performer at a professional level. It runs the spectrum from absolutely thrill of your life to pretty mundane and pretty boring depending on what job you do. So I started playing music when I was at school, recorder, then trumpet. So when you are learning an instrument, performing can seem a bit intimidating. Lots of people watching you because you know that you're not good on the instrument, you're not proficient and accomplished. So there is nerves, like, will I get it right? Am I doing it right? I don't want people to see me making mistakes. But also you've had a lot less preparation, and as you become much more seasoned as a performer, a lot of those fears just drop away, because if you're playing the same songs a lot, or if you're playing in sort of cover bands, wedding bands, a lot of the same repertoire comes back, and you've played those songs many, many times before, and the technical demands of the performance is well below probably what you're capable of. So it's a very well rehearsed and deep in your muscle memory. So when I'm doing a lot of gigs like that, I'm not nervous at all because I know how to play the songs. I've done it many, many times, so it's not really an issue to be nervous. It should always be exciting, and some people say, like, oh yeah, if you're not enjoying it, then, or if you're not growing, you're dying, or just give up. But as a professional, sometimes you'll be playing music that you don't really want to play, but it pays, and it's an extra pressure on the performing, because you get, and I use a slight disparaging term, weekend warriors. So like, oh yeah, I could do a few gigs at the weekend, all this kind of stuff. But you're probably playing the music that you want to play, and there's not as much pressure. You're probably not getting paid for it, or getting paid very little, but that's not really the object of doing it. Whereas if you're working as a professional, your reputation is everything. So not like you're only as good as your last performance, but you have to turn up, be professional, be flexible, just be a good team player, and then you'll get more work, because unless you're a huge star and you can really dictate your own terms, which I'm not, you generally rely on other people for work and word of mouth. So it's how you are is going to affect not only that day's performance, but then future work, and obviously future work being money. So it's very important to get things right, but just be a good team player. It's when you're playing lots of gigs like that, you'll just generally be doing the same sort of things over and over again, so it shouldn't be a problem. But some people will be less prepared, or they're called in last minute. Alcohol's another thing. It can make you a bit more loose, and I like to have a beer before I go on stage, but just generally one. And you don't want to drink too much fizzy stuff if you're singing as well. The size of the venue and the stage can have a massive impact on your experience as well. If it feels like it's too big for you, or it's too small for where you think you are in your career, or where you'd like to be. So if you play sometimes a very small gig, very intimate, that can be quite nerve-wracking as well, because people are much closer to you and you can actually see them, whereas if you're on a larger stage, you can't really see the audience. It can often be just like a black wall, and often that can be easier because you're not directly looking people in the eye. It's like a distance, like a step removed from the audience, so you can just kind of get on with it and enjoy it. Playing with my own band, Indigos, we mostly played sweaty little dive bars in London, which was really fun. I would have liked to progress to play bigger venues, but it's not the way things worked out, but maybe in the future. So that was cool, but then it's the whole thing leading up to that, because especially if you're that young and you're doing gigs to build a career, that's the whole point of what you're doing. It's your high point of your week, and everything is driving towards that. So you've got the day job and all that other kind of stuff around it, but then even on the day, you're on stage for a very, very small amount of time, so everything has to lead up to that. And there's dragging all your gear in and out of the car, or on public transport if you're in a city, setting up, waiting to play. And there's a lot riding on it, but that was some of the most fun I've had on stage. And it's completely different when you play your own material as well to when you're playing for someone else. If you've got a well-paid gig for someone else, then obviously you've got to get it right and do a professional job. Sometimes you might be just filling in on a pub or something. It's not that important. But when you're doing your own thing, other people might not realise the mistakes because they don't know the music, but for you it feels like a extra special thing. And when you play your own music and people like it, it's almost like a sense of acceptance from them. You're really, especially if you're singing, you're really bearing yourself open, like bearing your soul and saying like, this is what I am, this is what I'm feeling. And then if people cheer back and really accept it, that's amazing. Obviously you shouldn't use that as a self-esteem boost, but lots of people in performing, maybe lots of broken people and insecure people are drawn to that because you get an enormous amount of energy back from the audience. If you're good and they're liking it. We've all bombed as well. One of the most interesting gigs we did, and I'll talk about this in detail about some other Indigos gigs, we played a pub in Camden called the Fiddler's Elbow, and we spoke to our bass player's landlady. She said, oh yeah, that used to be called Mother Redcap, mother meaning witch, and the site which the pub was on, it was some crossing of some ley lines, so it was like a sacred energy site. And I remember the gig was late December, it was really cold, and when the other bands played, there was some reaction from the audience, but it was still kind of cold in the building. But then when we played, even though people weren't jumping around, the heat just grew, and it was really, really hot. And she said, yeah, probably it's because you guys were working well together and a good band, and you'd drawn on the energy that was sort of latent in that area and then used it, which I found was really interesting. And that's another reason that I really want to play larger venues. So I'd love to work with the energy of an enormous crowd, and it's a sort of feedback loop when you're playing well. So you're giving off energy to the crowd, and then they're giving it back, and it just builds and builds and builds, and it can be an absolutely incredible thing. Again, if you're playing your own music as well, it has that extra special touch on it. So I'd love to do that and really just slam out some wicked songs and just get the crowd going and feel that pump of energy. Some people say, is it better than sex? And I would say, if I had to draw a graph, the actual high point of sex, the climax, that would be probably the absolute most fun you can have, because at that moment you are ecstasy, absolutely useless to the world. But then as you come down, obviously that will come back down more to reality, whereas the high of being on stage, it's not quite as high as that exact point, but it's a massively sustained high. So overall could definitely be more fun. Obviously it depends who you're doing it with, who you're playing with and who you're sleeping with. Of course, the style of music has a big impact on how you feel on stage as well, because some styles of music have much more energy than others. A good band will have that. I mean, you could have like a funk band or like a really kicking jazz band, or a rock band that they're tight players and really playing well. They'll have that energy. But you have certain forms of rock and heavy metal, maybe some pop stuff as well, where it's amplified enormously. There's a huge amount of energy coming off the stage, and also physically, because the speakers are pushing a lot of air. And when you have bands that really chug that chunky guitar sound, it's just it's a lot of energy. And when you play, there's the band interacting together, and that builds energy, which then feeds back from the audience. But sometimes it can also feel like you're channeling energy from somewhere else, or you're channeling something. And again, so for me, the most exciting times would be playing my own music, but also being absolutely, totally 100% in sync with the other guys on stage. So we had one time, we have a song called Potential, and the idea is that it's showing off our potential as musicians. That was a kind of cheeky side angle, but also exploring, well, if the hidden spiritual knowledge hadn't been hidden throughout the years, would we be more advanced as a species right now? So what would be our potential? But very technical, ludicrously technical showpiece. And we didn't play it live because there's so many different sections to remember, and it's just ridiculous, but we managed to get through it once in a rehearsal, and it was incredible because it felt like a telepathic link, because we were all totally tuned in together, almost like psychically. So I imagine some sports teams have this, or when you get into the flow with someone and it goes beyond thought, you're just connected and you just know what everyone else is doing. It was like that, and just for the 9 minutes the song goes for, we were almost in this trance of just perfection, and then finished the song, like dropped out of it, and it was just incredible. I remember that for the rest of my life. That was one of the most incredible things I've done, because it was so difficult and we absolutely nailed all the sections. I've got a podcast, previous episode, listening and analysing that song, so if you listen to it you can see that it is crazy, and to be able to perform that perfectly is something else. Who you're on stage with has a big impact as well, especially with Indigos, playing with Musashi, this Japanese wizard on the guitar. Every time I played with him it was a thrill, and he could drop my jaw every time that he played, pretty much. And just the thrill of him being there and him adding into what I was creating, just a thrill of like, oh wow, he's on my team, like he's in my band. That was amazing. And it's almost like kind of a gang thing, or like a team, but you're together, you're working towards something together, and everyone's on the same page. And then when it's at a very high level, it's almost like that telepathic link, which is, it's an unusual form of intimacy as well. You can sometimes get that with people you haven't met, if you're playing material that you all know and you can all link in together. But that's what's really exciting about playing live, and it's playing on a cruise ship, and often you have your back to the drummer. So I was playing bass and we were playing, I can't remember, it's some jazz thing that we were improvising some slightly funky feel on, and I've been playing with a guy for about 2 months by that point, like pretty much every day, and we're playing in a small bar on the ship, and I had my back to him, but we were just absolutely locked in sync, and I'd change a little bit and then he'd follow, and we'd just playing together but without looking at each other, and just sort of feeling that. So it's an incredible thing to do that. There's also going to be times where you just absolutely bomb, and if you do enough performing, obviously some of them are not going to be world class. So yeah, there's a saying, is that you don't rise to the level of your expectations, you fall to the level of your training, which I like that, because especially with playing an instrument, there's a lot of muscle memory involved. So you know the songs, and then say if you're playing a solo, there's higher level things that you can do, but there's always, we were taught at college, here's the kind of like basic level safety net, so if it all goes wrong, play this and you'll get through it. So sometimes you find yourself just dropping right down to that, but you can keep going and it's still professional level. I remember one time I was working on a ferry and I'd announced the last song of the night, and it was a Bruno Mars song. I think it was Locked Out of Heaven, and my mind just went blank. And it wasn't just that the lyrics gone blank, because you can have the lyrics in front of you to read, but it was like 20 years of music experience had just vanished from my brain. I couldn't find the note, I couldn't hear it, I couldn't pitch the melody line, so I was like, okay, I'll just pretend I'm playing a guitar solo and I'll play something along. And I couldn't work out what key it was. Is it in D minor or C minor? And then so I was like, oh my god, this is not working, so what's the next level safety net? Well, just play some notes that are familiar to both keys and that should work. And it was like a blind man searching in the dark for the notes. It was I saw some guy come up to take a picture, and I just finished the song just before he took a picture, and he looked a bit disappointed. And my partner at the time, on stage, she thought that was hilarious and was laughing about it for a good few days afterwards. It was incredible. It's just like my brain and all my abilities had just absolutely switched off. Not forgetting the words, but just forgetting how to play, how to sing. It was just crazy. And I couldn't really restart the song or say, okay, well that's it, because I just announced this is the last one. So I was just stuck in this 2 or 3 minutes of absolute hell. Playing on ships has been quite an interesting experience as well, because you often play every day, which is quite a step up from just playing at the weekends. So it builds a stamina in your voice and your fingers when you're playing. But working on ships, it can be quite rough physically as well. It's quite interesting, because we started working on a small ferry, and it was, the sea was at force 10, so that's quite rough. And literally the floor's moving, and the ship would be seesawing side to side, and occasionally it would be so rough that they'd just have to cancel the performances. But I didn't really get seasick much. I found it quite funny, because like the more rough it got, the more fun it was, because yeah, literally the dance floor was swaying and people were like, someone was falling over on the dance floor, or I'd go up to some of the upper decks and visit the piano player on the top, so the Sky Lounge, and people were just, they couldn't walk because the ship was all over the place. So it was, people were staggering around like they're absolutely smashed off the face drunk. Very funny to watch. just gave the performance a bit more of an edge. It's just it's fun to do, and I really enjoyed that. And I've played on really small ships where we were rehearsing, and the piano player, like, his arse actually left the piano stool because the front of the ship dipped so much. In other performers, there was a lady who came on to sing, and she just took her heels and just couldn't wear them, so she's almost sliding around on stage. And I did a solo show, and I had to hold onto the piano while I changed my guitar sounds because literally the floor was moving so much I would have fallen over. So that's quite fun, regardless of like how seasick the audience is, or if they're not there because they're all seasick. But I really enjoy doing that. We'd sometimes play out on deck, which would be nice if the sun was out, not so much if it's raining. And I remember one time we'd been out to Barcelona for the day and then got back on the ship, and we were a couple of pints in, just nicely buzzed, and the sun was going down, this beautiful pink sunset, and I turned around to look at the saxophone player. We just almost laughed like it was our first cruise job. Like, this is amazing, we're getting paid for this. Just standing out playing jazz just off the coast of Spain, a little bit drunk, watching the sunset. So that was amazing. One of the high points, there was a Freddie Mercury tribute act came on board. I was playing in the backing band for that night, and it's the first time I played with him. It was awesome. It was on guitar, and there's a lot of pressure on the guitarist in a Queen show because obviously Brian May is so well known. Like, even your grandma will know if you hit some of the notes wrong in some of those solos. And I had about 3 or 4 days to prepare, and I really, really nailed it. I did loads and loads of practice, apart from my other work as well that I was doing. So I was playing sort of 4 hours a day on stage and doing 3 or 4 hours a day practice. My hands were aching a bit, but absolutely nailed it. And the production team really stepped up what they were doing. Not they were doing a bad job already, but they built this whole rock rig looking stage set, and it was just awesome. And that's really my forte, like real rock playing, and so I'd absolutely nailed it. And it was great that some of the other guest acts on board, oh man, that was amazing. And even some of the passengers said, oh, who was that guitarist? He was amazing. I said, oh yeah, that was Matt. He normally plays in the duo in the pub. And the passengers, no, that's not him. It was. But yeah, totally my style of music, absolutely killed it. So that was a real high point. Been some low points around that as well, very much on the same ship and similar ships, because if you do a gig like that, which is a residency gig, which you could be playing in a hotel or a cruise ship, you're playing pretty much every day, and you only have so much material. You might have a week's worth of material to cycle around, and you could learn some more material, but then you've got to take time out of your day where you could be sunbathing or swimming, so who bothers? Sometimes it was nice to play some jazz standards because then I can improvise a bit, and so you're creating and it's something a bit different. But it got incredibly boring. Like, one of the longest contracts I did was around 6 months with one, just in one stretch, and just playing the same songs, like the same 3 or 4 days worth of songs for 6 months, just mind-numbing. And if you're there playing the same things for the same audience, and if they're on there for a long time, like a few weeks or a few months, they're getting bored of your repertoire as well. So you're bored, they're bored, and so you've got your day free, and then you might be playing on-off from like 6 to 11 in the night with some breaks. And then it just becomes a slog, like you're just turning up for work. And things have got a bit stricter now with drinking on stage, but there's been times where, well, they're like, yeah, just be a bit more discreet, or have some mini breaks. But sometimes, yeah, we get quite drunk just before stage, just out of boredom, or drunk during the day. And on Christmas Day, one day, the staff had a meal with some of the officers, and the captain was chatting to us, and really funny guy. And I got so drunk that by 11 o'clock, my last set, like, I couldn't see. But I was playing guitar along to a piano player who's playing Adele and Amy Winehouse, so it wasn't difficult. But yeah, stuff like that can just get really boring. And if you're playing to people who aren't there to watch you, or you're just background music, it can be pretty soul destroying because it almost doesn't matter what you're playing. And sometimes they want to hear things, sometimes they just want you to play really subdued in the background because they want to talk if they're having some pre-dinner drinks. And like, yeah, I get that, because I'd be the same. I wouldn't want someone on stage trying to grab the attention, like, oh, hey, do you like the Carpenters? Here's a song by blah, blah, blah. They just don't want to know. So some of those sets, we played just instrumental stuff, and I could have a bit of a noodle around, do some solos, which made it a little bit more interesting for me. Then also you can save your voice for the evening. We had the assistant cruise director, so that's the assistant entertainment manager. She put the program together. She would often get us to play as much as possible because they were under a lot of pressure from the bars to sell drinks. So the only reason really we were on board was to sell more drinks, which is a bit depressing when you realised it. But she'd want us to just play as many sets as possible. But then you're getting quite watered down and sort of overexposed to the audience, whereas some other managers would say, okay, yeah, just play from, say, 8 till 11, but absolutely bang it out, so it's more of an event. So you'd come on, play some really high energy sets, and then you're done. But then if you've got to play too much, then you have to really pace yourself, and your voice is going to wear out, and then you're not really doing yourself a favour or the audience. It can be a bit depressing just having to pace yourself and deliberately hold back because you know you're doing a lot, and then you're doing a lot the next day. So in that situation, it can be very boring. And I had an iPad with me, which a lot of musicians have for their lyrics, or some chords, and I knew all the songs backwards by this point, so I was actually playing Angry Birds on stage. So in between songs, it looked like I was swiping to get the next song up, but I was actually working out what to do with the Angry Birds or just moving them. And I got through a lot of levels. I'd been stuck on one level for about 2 or 3 days, and it was like this Zen Angry Birds. So I'd playing the song, not really focusing on it, and then thinking, oh, should I get the red bird first, or like do the little blue one? So I'd have a few minutes to think about it, and I got through 2 or 3 levels in a 40-minute set. So I was really happy about that. Obviously no one else knew, but that was, something that I did. Weddings can be interesting, can be a bit like corporate functions. They can go sort of like one or two ways. You can have people who are a bit drunk and in a really good mood, or they can just be a mess, like a pub Christmas party or something. I explained to my wife, like, imagine if you went to work every time and you think, I hope nobody knocks over my equipment or pours beer on it, because that can happen. And with weddings, so if they're getting really rowdy and then the ties get taken off and then put around their heads, and then usually shirts are off, and then like that's it, absolutely hammered, just get out there as soon as you can. It can be just kind of going through the motions, like you play the first dance and then first set, then a break, then second set, and then you're done, you're packing up. Because I got married not too long ago, it makes me think of when I got married and see the happy couple and I think, oh, that's nice. And yeah, they're usually in a good mood, not always. Sometimes the grooms are very shy and they'll be around for the first dance and then like not around much. Or sometimes when people have sort of a lot of money, they can be a bit snooty, they're kind of nouveau riche. But then if some people have a lot, then they can be super nice. We did one, it was actually 21st birthday party, and the mother of the birthday boy came over and said, is everything all good? You all set up? You all got some food? Yeah, okay, great. Now I'm just going to go and drink a bottle of champagne. Not a glass of champagne, but a bottle. And they couldn't be nicer. They're, anything you want? Any more drinks? And so sometimes you get taken care of really well, and sometimes not so much. Or you're like, oh, there's your room, you can wait in, or just kind of hang around, or there's no food or drink provided. And you can be there. It can be a long day. Like you might set up at 5:30 if you play in the evening, or if you're doing some afternoon stuff, you might get there for 2 o'clock and not leave till 12. So it's a whole day's work with possibly 2 hours drive each way. Then you're packing all your gear up, so it can be a long slot. So you're on stage for 2 hours, but out of the whole day, you're not really playing, and a lot of the time is spent waiting around. Musicians do a lot of waiting, and then getting to know the people in the band. You might have just turned up and not met them before, which is another thing that happens a lot. Lots of agencies have a pool of musicians. Most of them are sort of regular, but then they'll call in different ones if they need a drummer or a bass player emergency on the day. And so quite often you turn up and you're a dep. I think it might stand for deputy, or I don't know. There's someone that fills in basically. And so they'll have got the set list before, but you don't rehearse because it takes a lot of time and money, and people often live in different parts of the country and then sort of converge on the gig. So if the gig is in, say, Birmingham in the Midlands, you might have someone driving from 2 hours from one direction, 2 hours from the other, someone be half hour. So it's not possible to meet up beforehand. But you know the songs like Superstition, Mr. Brightside, Summer 69, like everyone's played the songs before. So it's a bit like if you had actors that had all played their part with a different theatre company, they all came together, they'd be able to get through the show. Even if they had, without rehearsals, like they'd be able to pull it off. So then, quite often just chatting to people that you've never met before, or some that you have, ideally, and it can be quite interesting. But then the stage can be fun, or depending on, can you hear yourself? Do you have good monitor systems or in-ears? If you can't hear what's going on, then that can be obviously very difficult to play, and that's can be more common for drummers as well. They can be behind a drum kit and a wall of amps and just not really hear what's going on, so they'll just play the song as they know them and then stop when it's done, which is impressive. So if you've said yes to a professional gig, chances are you're doing it, because if you don't get paid. Most people are self-employed, they don't get holiday pay or sick pay, so the only reason you wouldn't be doing it is if you got really sick, or possibly you'd sacked it off for a higher paying job. So yeah, when you're there, it's work, so you've got to get ready, learn the songs, or busk it if you don't know them. Turn up, and amateur bands who are just sort of doing it for fun, it's their night out, so they'll play, and often this will be like in a pub. And I've been in bands where the drummers come over and said, "Oh, hey, great, like the landlord said we can play another set if we want." So we're doing that for free then, are we? Whereas professional bands, they will play the set and then get packed down as soon as possible. That's probably the difference. If you watch a band and they've played, see how quickly they pack down, and if it's quick, they're pros. And that's not necessarily about not being in the moment, because yeah, you enjoyed the playing, but then if you got half an hour to pack down and then possibly a 2-hour drive to get home, and you get home at maybe 2 a.m. after a long day, you're driving late at night, tired, and that's not good. For me, tiredness is much worse than driving drunk. I don't drive drunk, but yeah, if you're falling asleep at the wheel, that's incredibly dangerous. So finding places to pull over, or I'll often have some wedding cake in the car now on the way home, just a bit of sugar or some chocolate to keep me awake, because yeah, it's not normal that you drive home at 2 a.m. Well, some people have different jobs, but that's another thing. So you've come off stage late in your working day. So for me, when I get home, generally I'm quite tired, so I'll go to bed fairly quickly, but some people take quite a while to wind down. They might watch a film, and this whole sex, drugs and rock and roll thing, it's because you've just come off stage and ideally had a real emotional high, and everyone's really good mood, everyone's high, but then this is generally quite late at night, and then it takes a while to wind down, or you want to continue partying, and then the only things really that's going to come close to that would be either very dangerous things or sex and drugs, and also they're in dangers. So sometimes, yeah, you come off stage and just like, great, I'm done, I'm finished, I want to go to bed. With the more professional things or the playing for other people stuff that I do, it can be weekends where, yeah, you're done, so you've got other things to do in the morning, or you've got a gig the next day, so you want to be rested. So yeah, you can't get hammered because you're driving home, unless you work on a cruise ship where nobody drives, and then the drinking can very easily get out of control. Lots of musicians on ships drink a lot. The rules got a lot more strict since COVID, but yeah, we'd have drinks in between, before, after, and again, it was just a coping mechanism, really. And I don't want to sound like I'm whining, because I'm not, but some things can get quite boring, and if you're playing the same things over and over again, or if you're like in the backing band for the main house band, there's certain set shows that you'd be doing, and there's not a lot of leeway with that. You might be able to put a slightly different feel in on the drums or something, but you're playing set things, and it can be very boring and creatively unfulfilling. So yeah, I've done quite a few drunk gigs, but there was a saying on board. It was, if you can't do your job drunk, you can't do your job, which you could get away with that for musicians, but obviously if you're one of the engineers or deck officers on the ship, that cannot apply. We were getting a bit bored on one ship, and the piano player had been reading a book called Effortless Mastery, and he said, put your entire attention onto every note. Make every note that you've played the best one you've ever played, and try and have that sort of zen level of focus. And that really changed things, because again, we'd be playing our set shows and going through the motions a lot, but going through that approach and just making sure that you're trying to get perfection with everything, or try and make it the best as it can be, it totally changes your approach. And really on stage, the enjoyment you have, it's what you make it. Because you could be doing a small venue and having a great time and a really intimate connection, or you could be doing a huge show and it's just like incredible energy levels, and different times of the day. Like when I was starting out, most of my gigs were at night, because we were just playing bars and things, and then playing during the day was quite an interesting upgrade, like playing some like small local festivals and just playing in the field. Lots of people were there, so that was cool. So it's great just to play in so many different places, and then once you've played a lot, very few things faze you, because you turn up and they'll say, right, here's where you're playing today. Like, okay, and it could be the corner of a room, could be a staged off area, could be the corner of a tent, It could be anything. So you become very flexible. And I was playing at a beer festival in a pub last summer, and one of my friends there said, like, how do you not get nervous? Like, how do you cope with this? So well, I've just done it a lot. Like, the songs I've played, it's burned into my muscle memory, into my hands, and I've performed so many times that I know how to do it. And it is my job as well. But when you're doing your job, you don't get nervous because it's something that you've done a lot. Even if someone's watching you do it, you'd be able to do it. So preparation is, I would say, is the one thing that will remove all your nerves, or that will tackle nerves. If you know what you're doing and that you know that your equipment is in order, then there shouldn't be anything to go wrong. You might make a couple of tiny mistakes, but most people won't notice those. Playing different instruments helps keep things interesting as well. I play guitar, that's my first instrument, but also sing and play bass. So playing bass, it's like playing the same song from a different perspective, playing different parts, and that can be really interesting as well. Some of the best moments of my life have been when I was on stage. I've had some incredible highs, but then being a musician and the lifestyle around that, there can be some profound lows as well. And often they go quite closely together. Sometimes you could be having all sorts of issues going on and you just have to get on stage. If you're really sick, or maybe if someone died or some massive family emergency like that, yeah, you can pull a gig and someone else can fill in for you, or you just have to cancel it. But what a lot of people don't realise is that if it's your job, especially if you don't get paid, if you're not going to turn up, like, you have to do it. And this whole, the show must go on, it can be very difficult. I mean, you could be dealing with something like some family illness or going through a breakup, and you have to get on stage and not necessarily smile as much. It depends if you're the front person or if you're singing. But easier for the bass or drums, it'd be kind of shadowed a bit at the back. But just to get on stage and have to do that, obviously other people have to go to work when they're going through bad times. Yeah, nothing against doing other jobs like working in a supermarket, but having to absolutely shine and perform and entertain people and bring the energy of a room up when you're feeling so low can be very difficult, but that's just what the job is. It's easier if you're performing your own material, because if it's your band and you had a really bad day or things are going badly, again, so from a sort of heavy metal point of view, you could just slam through the first 5 or 6 songs, not even talk, and get some of that energy out, and then, okay, right, how's it going? But then if you're doing musical theatre or something, you're like, hello, how's it going? And it's it's incredibly difficult to do that, but people do it, and kudos to them. So in summary, I want to have more amazing experiences on stage. I've had some good gigs recently, and because I'm singing every week, my voice is getting a lot stronger and it's match fit, which is good, so there's no nerves around that and it's consistent. But yeah, I really want to get some more originals gigs, play loud with my bands. Got some acoustic arrangements that I'd like to get out there as well, and just show people the music I've been doing. So that would be cool, and I look forward to doing that soon. That will probably be crowdfunded, and then I'll have some more stuff online. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back soon. Would you like to earn money with no effort at all, simply by having your phone on? The data's being sold around the world anyway, and the Tapestry app helps you take a cut. Link in the show notes.